From Long Savanna to infrastructure to housing, those are some of the issues that Charleston City Councilman Stephen Bowden is tackling. I talk one-on-one with the District 10 Councilman for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. City of Charleston Councilman Stephen Bowden, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. It's great to see you as always.
Oh, I appreciate it greatly. Needless to say, you are a councilman for the District 10 area, which represents basically out of West Ashley. And of course, you're running for re-election coming up here soon, and I want to talk to you about that. But what is the latest right now in District 10?
I think we're on the right track for the first time in living memory. It's no secret that our growth has exploded, and people have any number of reasons to be discontent with with our livability situation right now. It's hard to get around. I mean, it's hard to go to a grocery store. You have to drive inside of 526 to get your dry cleaning done. But at the same time, we've taken steps that people have been asking for forever. In my first term, we banned fill and build development. We've preserved 200 acres out of almost 600 in the Church Creek Basin for flood relief. Any new development has to build according to rules that actually improve the overall flooding situation. We're working with the legislature and county to get the money we need to build the roads to dig out of this hole we're in. As I've been going around and knocking on people's doors, I think there's, a sense of optimism, that, the last few major rain events have not caused any structural flooding in the Church Creek Basin. I'm gonna find some wood to knock on, so we don't, tempt fate here. But I think we're making real progress. I think it's measurable. And most importantly, I think people can feel it. And so, happy to say that I think we're on the right track. We've got a long way to go, but I'm committed to getting us there.
Where exactly is that measurable growth in District 10?
So, District 10 is going to have the most significant growth probably of any part of our city over the next probably 10, 15, 20 years. Long Savanna is coming online. I think the Post and Courier recently reported that 6,000 housing units are coming to this area over the next, 15, 20 years. So we still have time to fix some of the mistakes of the past. But we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that growth is coming. And, growth is a double-edged sword. The cities all over America would kill for the problems that we have. But our residents feel those problems. That congestion, is robbing them of time with their families, time at work, to, make a living. All sorts of ways that it's making our lives more challenging. That's what government is here to do. Government is here to plan on the front end and step in and solve problems on the back end. Big societal challenges that it takes all of us working together to solve. And that's why I'm running for a second term. While I see the optimism, I still see the challenges. And I want to see through the progress that we've started in my first term.
Yes, sir. And I definitely want to talk about that in just a second. But you talked about obviously that big issue right now that was reported in the Post Courier earlier this week. A developer, as you know, wants to build 100 townhomes on Beast Ferry Road, but West Ashley and Johns Island residents worry the high density development could make traffic and flooding worse, as you just mentioned. How can the roads actually support 100 more homes?
Look, in their current form, they could support 100 more homes, but we know that it's thousands more that are coming, right? And so, I think residents are reacting to, the much higher numbers that are being reported, and the promises that folks like me have made to not make this problem worse. I am not opposed to development. I've said that from day one. We have a housing crisis in this city. And what we cannot do is, pretend that the growth isn't happening, and say, no to any new development, because that's just going to push it out to, Somerville and Goose Creek and Cottageville, and, strangle us in the congestion that sprawl guarantees. So, we can build at plenty of places in the city. I mean, we can build dense on the peninsula. We can do it along transit corridors that are existing and planned, like the Low Country Rapid Transit. That's going to, ultimately go down Rivers Avenue. At least if we're, thinking about this problem as, as an entire region. But the density that has kind of long been planned for Outer West Ashley, parts of Outer James Island, Johns Island. It just doesn't really make a lot of sense. In theory, there's ways you can deal with it in those other parts. In Outer West Ashley, the area that's long been planned as sort of a town center, so that we can have the services out here that right now we have to all get in our cars and drive on the same main arteries to get to, is frankly just too low lying and wet to build on. And so we've got to revisit those plans. And so Long Savanna has some positive aspects to it, along with the negative that we know it's coming, but we can't continue adding to the problem. And so I trust the county to take a look at that development and make the right decision on it ultimately. But the same folks wanted to annex into the city, and at the time we just didn't believe that was a great idea. We know what we need out here. We need businesses. We need services, and we've got plenty of residential units coming. We need to focus on getting the development closer to where those jobs are, and we cannot have everybody getting in their car to make a 20-minute trip without traffic that turns into an hour and a half trip with traffic.
And I buried the lead, Councilman, but as you just mentioned, it is a Charleston County issue, but it will affect the city of Charleston greatly in the future. But let me ask you just an obvious question. Why didn't they have the infrastructure in place before this particular development?
There's a lot of answers to that. I think the realistic one is that committing ourselves to 526 for so long came at the expense of more achievable projects that we know would relieve traffic. Without that specter of 526 hanging over everything, I hope we can take a shot at getting a referendum passed. And when I say we, I mean the county, right. But certainly with the cities participating, getting a referendum done in 2026, so that the only pot of money available to build roads isn't coming from the state, right? We're going to need it at the county level, but we also have to commit to those achievable projects, rather than trying to push through something that probably lost popular support a decade ago.
Councilman, let me ask you this. Okay, let me just ask the obvious. What achievable projects right now that the city is willing to work with the county on?
So we'll be submitting our list here. I just think the mayor did it the other day. So it's a flyover at Magwood. Right. It's really we'd have loved to have seen some of these projects a little further down the line at this point, but it is what it is. Infrastructure projects are difficult. There's permitting challenges that are out of our hands at this point, out of the county's hands, and we get all that, right? But at the end of the day, these projects are not getting any cheaper, and so we've got to widen 61 and do some infrastructure or intersection improvements along 61. So in my district, the intersection of Muirfield and McClure Hall and 61, that, people are absolutely risking life and limb every time they try to get out of their neighborhood to make a left onto 61 at any peak time. I mean, it has gotten to be out of control, and we know that there's more growth coming in Dorchester County. And so, we've got to plan for that. We've got to relieve, the inability to even get out of their own neighborhoods for some people. Let alone, some bigger challenges. I mean, Magwood is a choke point every single day, twice a day, for hours at a time. So, we know beyond a shadow of a doubt where the problems are. In other parts of the area, Dorchester Road is going to need some, really, really major improvements. So the projects have been planned for a long time. It's just a commitment to do those rather than, try to, plan for a home run that ultimately may not have even been a home run, even if it had ever been completed.
You talk about obviously that part of 61 where you said that basically people can't even get out of that particular intersection without dealing with some traffic issues. Can for right now, can the Department of Transportation do something to, sync the lights so that the traffic can move more easily?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, there are steps like that. There's potentially creating some more pedestrian access. Lights that might create some more pedestrian access there. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's a 2-lane road
Right.
that is probably the busiest 2-lane road in the state.
Mm.
And so, it's unavoidable that we're gonna need, a shared turn lane at minimum, right? But we also have 2 bridges along 61 that are obsolete. So, they, first of all, feel like they're crumbling when you drive over them, but also don't allow any pedestrian access,
Right.
bike access, right? And so if you're a business owner along 61, I mean, what you should be hoping for is a major investment in not only cars being able to get through there, but people being able to get through there in different ways if they choose. That's only going to allow more access to your businesses. And again, I mean, this is an area that's starved for something to do. We love our Mexican restaurants, but I mean, my goodness, it'd be great if we could get something else to open. And those things are coming, but it's hard to build out here because it's low lying. It's
Right.
it's wet, right?
Sure.
It's they have these requirements to build, and so we need to be doing what we can as government, not only to move people around through their commutes, but make sure they can get to these businesses, so people aren't just going bust trying to provide people somewhere to go spend their money.
Let me ask you this. I don't even know if this is practical, Councilman, but I know this is very popular in Mount Pleasant. But where in your district, in particular, in West Ashley, can you build roundabouts near these intersections that are completely busy all the time?
So I'm a huge fan of roundabouts. The statistics are very clear that they eliminate fatal accidents basically to zero.
Mm.
They eliminate accidents with injuries, and I'm a personal injury attorney, and I can tell you for beyond a shadow of a doubt that the most dangerous thing we do every day is get in our cars. It's if you can eliminate that risk plus have some traffic benefits, it's almost a no-brainer. I mean, it's going to take some convincing, but they're safer, no question, than a 4-way stop with a traffic light. And so that intersection that I mentioned at Muirfield and 61, that's what everybody would like there. At least that's what I would like, and that's kind of what's gained some steam is a roundabout. But even still, I mean, a roundabout requires years of permitting. In talking to our legislators, it's interesting. Like they're like, well, Stephen, I mean, in theory, we could just appropriate the money now, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense because you can't spend any more than a certain amount a year. Because it's going to take some time for the permitting processes and the engineering and everything. And so, it's all a process. Roundabouts wouldn't be any quicker necessarily than any of the other infrastructure improvements that are talked about. But we've got to be committed to them. I mean, we have got to figure out how to get a little bit impatient with this process. And the legislature hopefully is looking at ways to reduce the permit load that's required to build one of these things. I certainly hope our representatives in Congress are as well, because it's going to take everybody being committed to the understanding that this is just public money being flushed down the drain. And it's getting absolutely lost in this process that, I can tell you when you go to somebody's door during a campaign and try to explain what's taken so long to build something, they don't buy it. And I think a little bit of common sense would go a heck of a long way in permitting reform at various levels of government.
So who do you actually have to commit? I mean, actually convince? Is it the government, or is it actually your actual residents, or both?
It's both. I mean, look, to get anything done that spends public money, you've got to have buy-in. And the more complicated a topic gets, the harder you have to work to convince people that there's a right way to get it done. I think where politicians go wrong, and this is just me, giving some philosophy here, but I think where politicians go wrong is trying to sugarcoat things or say things in a political way rather than just trusting people to get it. Going to them with the God's honest truth and just laying it out for them, warts and all, and explaining the nuanced details. And some people will completely tune you out, but at the end of the day, that's the only correct way to go about things, is to have a vision, to take that vision to the voters in a campaign, and then if they choose your vision on election day, then sticking to it and having a little bit of impatience to push it through the process.
And I'm playing hop and jump and all of this with this particular issue, but let's go back to Long Savanna. What exactly is the city's vision right now for Long Savanna?
So we are every step of the way trying to improve Long Savanna, and I say that not that it's government's role to go in and tell property owners what to do. I think we would all agree that we don't want city government or any level of government to be central economic planners. But what we need to do is put fair rules in place that benefit our residents and rigorously enforce them. But with a situation like Long Savanna, where it has been approved in some form since I was a senior in high school, I can't go tell them, nor would I, you can't build this, right? That would be illegal. And so, what we can do is work with them on a better plan. And that benefits everybody. And so, for example, there was a property in the Long Savanna development area that the school district had a right to purchase, and they decided that their plans made sense to build a school on Sanders Road rather than in Long Savanna, and so they passed on that option. The mayor and he brought this to us, and we wholeheartedly agreed. Um, you know, Decided to go to the developers and say, actually, we really need a school there. We need the school to be there rather than across Sanders Road, because we know there's going to be more congestion in the future, and we don't need every single car going over to a school to get onto a main artery at peak times. And so, through working with the developer and the school district, we're kind of heading towards having a school there rather than high density apartments that would have, absolutely maxed out the density at that site. And that's a win for everybody, right? And that's the kind of guidance that that the government needs to be providing. I don't. I'm never going to blame somebody who's trying to develop a piece of real estate for trying to make money on their investment, right? That's the way our economic system works. But there's a give and a take to everything. Everything's a negotiation. We can all work together to achieve common aims, and that's where we've got to get to, rather than viewing every piece of development as a zero sum game. Either somebody some greedy developer gets rich, or the residents are stuck with more traffic. It's just a conversation that the truth gets lost there somewhere in the middle of those arguments. It's never going to help to caricature each other. At the end of the day, we all need to be working towards the same common good. And I think that's where we're getting to with Long Savanna.
So when you think about Long Savanna, where exactly will high density apartments be located in that particular development?
There are not a lot of apartments planned for out there. It's going to be mainly a collection of more like single family neighborhoods. There are a number of apartments planned for like the Beast Ferry corridor.
Sure.
Those are sort of mainly outside the city, but which is a separate problem that we could discuss. But at the end of the day, we need to work with each of those developers, just like we're working with the folks in Long Savanna, and see if there is some mutual win that we can achieve, while taking a look at what we're the things that we're allowing now, and being very careful about the unintended consequences. Because I can tell you that when they agreed to the development agreement for Long Savanna, nobody knew the Charleston we would be living in today, right? Nobody saw the pandemic coming. Nobody saw the explosive growth happening, and so we're just in a different situation. So we've got to just try to be looking down the road, and seeing those problems before we cause them.
What other problems may be caused because of this development?
Well, that's the hard part with planning, right? I mean, it's really easy to propose a moratorium. It's really hard to come up with actual solutions. And so, I mentioned that we have a housing crisis. What we've seen for 15 years is sprawl further and further out, at the cost of our quality of life. And so, we've got to balance those things. I mean, we have got to meet the demand for housing with an adequate supply that make sure that a family like mine, who was able to buy our house in 2018, and wouldn't be able to afford to buy it today, has some opportunity in this area. Otherwise, people are going to leave. We are going to force out you know, highly talented people that could, that could work to be securing our area's economic future for generations. And instead, we're forcing them out for, for what? We need to make sure that we've got adequate housing for police and firefighters and teachers. The scariest thing to me is that all this growth happens, and we force all of those folks out, way out, past Somerville and up almost to probably Orangeburg County, and they would have to drive through how many school districts, how many cities, how many counties that they could work in very easily, rather than the city of Charleston or the Charleston County School District. That's nurses that work at Roper St. Francis. Why would they drive an hour to work every day when they could work somewhere else, right? And so we're really looking at that those kinds of problems that we could very easily create if we're not committed to solving these problems in responsible ways, and again, ones that don't build high density apartments in outer West Ashley, but where we maybe need to negotiate on what we believe an acceptable height limit is for parts of the peninsula that frankly aren't historic, no matter what anybody thinks.
Oh man, and I grew up here on the peninsula, and we lived over here until 2023. Still got working down here every day. But let me ask you: has the city taken a housing stock for District 10? And what exactly is the city's economic development plan for Long Savanna and your district?
So I think we've got a relatively good plan with Long Savanna itself, right? If we ignore all the other problems, Long Savanna is a well thought out neighborhood, right? It's going to bring basically its own services to sustain itself. It's going to have plenty of commercial space that will serve all those rooftops. And so that's why I say in some ways, I mean, our lives will get better out here, when Long Savanna is built. It's just going to take sustained government effort to meet the challenge of the continued growth. And that's why we've got to get the referendum right in 2026, get it passed, and get those projects done. The economic development, if you build it, they will come, right? That's going to be true for us. We've got a growing economic base in this area. I mean, we've got to continue to diversify in lots of ways that we're going to need to work with the state and the county to do. But it's coming. We just need to make sure that we're taking the steps now to be ready for it.
What can you diversify in your district right now?
There's not a whole lot of business in my district to begin with. It is almost entirely residential. I mean, if you separate out District 10, really the only businesses are the Harris Teeter Shopping Center, and I love those places, and
Right.
and that's been a great addition to the area. But we need more, and for too long people have seen new more and more people to sort of pack out the same places that they already go to, right? I mean, try to go to Agave on a Friday night at 6 o'clock. I mean, you're gonna be waiting, right? And there's just not there's not quite the services to meet the demand yet. And that's frustrating people. I mean, that's tough to see, that as feeling like your government is just watching your life get harder and providing nothing to mitigate that whatsoever. And I get that, but you know I think genuinely great things are on the way. We just need to stay committed to a plan, that will allow us to thrive in the meantime.
Well, let me ask you this: what can the developers, for lack of a better word, bring to the table?
Yeah, look, that's a maybe the key question going forward for Charleston, right? The some of our legislators propose a so-called concurrency requirement that other states have, where we would be able to we would the city would have the flexibility to deny permits for properties that don't have the infrastructure to support the proposed density there. Um, there's some merit to that for sure. That's the kind of flexibility we don't have right now. But at the end of the day, it's also not particularly fair to just look at a developer and say, why aren't you creating, these things that society's failed to invest in for decades? And so there's a partnership there. I mean, I think Union Pier is going to be a really good example of that. um, you know, there's a lot of options for what you can do with a new neighborhood, for what a city can ask a developer to do. Affordable housing, park space, all sorts of things. But it's going to require, some concessions on our part, right? We can't say the tallest building you can build is 3 stories. Oh, and by the way, you have to create affordable housing. That I mean, just from a math problem perspective, that doesn't work. And so, we can ask developers to do a lot of things. We just need to be willing to compromise on, how they get it done. And there's a lot of, we've kind of started down that road with a fee and lieu system for affordable housing.
Right.
But we're not where we need to be with that sort of thing. I believe that you should pay your fair share as somebody who wants to develop something in this area. Develop something anywhere, right? That's going to affect existing residents. But at the end of the day, I mean, it serves no one just to pretend that we can stop them from building everything, or we can make unreasonable demands for what they can do. I mean, they're business people at the end of the day. It's not a charity. And so we can try to work with them and work something out, or they can take the strictest possible view of their property rights. And frankly, the United States Constitution probably supports them on that. So again, we can make a lot of progress by working with these folks rather than vilifying them.
So, what does the city put on the table now?
Well, again, I mean, I think we're making steps to try to, or we're taking steps to try to, move, housing stock through the permitting pipeline, so that you know, folks are able to build the projects that they plan to. Particularly for like needed things downtown and affordable housing projects. And so that's all good stuff. And so I think it's entirely fair and reasonable that when we're working on these projects on the front end, to engage with them and say, how can we make this better? How can this better serve the area? How can this be a success for you and the city and existing residents, right? There are deals to be made. And we just need to engage in the process in a fair way that's not changing the rules on anybody, or anything crazy like that. But just taking maybe a slightly more altruistic view of what can be accomplished with new development.
So, how many existing residents do you have versus the future residents coming to the area?
I have to double check that, but I would expect that the population, by the maybe not the next time we redistrict, but we'll be starting to get close. I'd expect probably 25 to 50% increase in the population out here by the time that we redistrict next time. and then potentially like 100% increase by the following 10 years. So I mean, it's coming. I mean, it's coming. It is going to radically change this area for good, and negative ways if we don't get a handle on this stuff immediately.
Well, let me ask you this, Councilman. How many new homes and commercial space are actually being built versus, rehabbing and better utilizing the existing space that you have?
Out here, it's mainly going to be new construction.
Mm.
But that leads to a great point, which is that we've got a lot of options for infill development. That's closer to the peninsula. That's going to create fewer congestion issues. That will be able to utilize things like the Ashley River crossing to get around in different ways than just getting in a car. That will be along planned transit corridors to again get around in ways that are different than everybody getting in their individual car. And so we've got great options. We just need to constantly be looking at what's getting in the way of these things, right? Is it is does the design review board pose a problem? Does the BAR make sense to extend to every part of the peninsula that it currently does? These are questions that we constantly have to be asking ourselves and shouldn't be scared to raise, because somebody's going to start jumping up and down with their hair on fire screaming about, these are the things that built Charleston, right? This city is an incredible place, and a lot of things went into building it. But what we can't do is make the conscious decision to die a museum. We are a living, breathing city that that my kids are going to grow up in, and that we need to be preparing for the future without losing those things that make us special. So that's got to be an evolving conversation going forward. And we certainly can't get to a place where every time some infill development is proposed, that some new group pops up on Facebook talking about we need to preserve this this property that nobody's ever considered to be particularly important architecturally, but now for some reason we're deciding it is, so that no progress can be made there.
Well, let me ask you in just 30 seconds, which areas in District 10 should be preserved? And moreover, Councilman, where, where exactly can infill development take place in your district?
So District 10 is easy. We don't have anything old. What needs to be preserved is our natural landscape. The areas that are protecting us from flooding, the wetlands, right? And we've made great strides to do that. Banning fill and build, like I talked about earlier. Buying up property that we've used for flood mitigation. Those sorts of things. But the infill needs to be closer to downtown, where again it's not going to create this sprawl that we've run into.
I'm running out of time, but City of Charleston Councilman Stephen Bowden, thank you for your time again. Welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thanks, Quintin. The election's on November 4th, and I'd love your vote if you live in District 10.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it, Councilman.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome.